This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bloomberg Businessweek Weekend podcast. We've officially wrapped up the month of November, and the health of the U.S. consumer is in focus during the all-important holiday shopping season. Well, ahead this hour, we'll speak with the founder and CEO of payments platform Chime on meeting the needs of millions of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. And our Bloomberg Businessweek cover story explores how unprepared many of us are for AI's next frontier, especially when it comes to our kids. All of that to come. We begin with the story that made us stop for a moment this past week. Charlie Munger, the alter ego, sidekick, and foil to Warren Buffett for almost 60 years as they transformed Berkshire Hathaway from a failing textile maker into an empire, has died. He was 99. He passed away on Tuesday at a California hospital, according to a company statement, in which Warren Buffett said that, quote, Berkshire Hathaway could not have been built to its present status without Charlie's inspiration, wisdom, and participation. Tim and I spoke with Bloomberg News reporter Noah Buhire, who covered and wrote about Munger's passing, and Bill Smead, the founder and CIO of Smead Capital Management and a longtime Berkshire investor.
I wrote a letter to Buffett probably 5 years ago, just thanking him for how incredibly generous that him and Munger have been with all of us. I mean, it literally changed our lives.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Oh, by communicating the discipline that they practiced. They shared why they were doing what they're doing all these years in the writing, in the annual meetings, sitting there and taking questions for 6 hours, all the way up into their 90s. It's like a gold mine of wisdom. I used to get irritated because I kind of wish they would restrict the questions to better questions, because as the years went by, there were a lot of goofy questions that came up.
But sometimes they got some goofy answers, which were fun.
Yeah, but here was this incredible resource.
Yeah.
Right. Charlie Munger was the Solomon of our era. He was the wisest man in the investment business. He was a Caltech grad, Harvard Law educated, right. Started a law firm in Los Angeles, had a successful career in real estate, a successful career in making common stock choices, and the right-hand guy to the most successful investment selector and asset allocator of all time. I mean, he is. We just admired him so much, and then of course we admired him immensely because he'd say exactly what he was thinking and didn't really care very much
Bill,
who he might offend in the process.
You mentioned that you've been doing this for over 40 years. What are some lessons that you've incorporated from Charlie Munger over these decades into the way that you manage portfolios and you allocate assets?
Yeah, when we're talking to people, I'm here in New York talking to some possible new customers, and we tell them when it comes to value people, we hold our winners to a fault, because compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. So if you can find a business, let's just right off the top of our head pick Occidental Petroleum, who Munger and Buffett started buying in the last year and a half or 2 years. They're generating massive free cash flow. They're paying down debt with it, but then they're also buying back stock. So like Buffett says, over the years, if it's a company generating high returns on equity, high free cash flow, buying back their stock, he ends up owning a larger and larger and larger part of the business as the years go by. That's what he did with Coke. That's what he did with American Express. That's what he did with a lot of different companies. And holding your winners the fault is a key component of alpha. As I explain to people, you buy a stock at 30 and pay cash. The worst thing that can happen is it goes to zero. You lose 30 points of alpha. If you buy a stock at 30 and it goes to 90 and you sell it and it goes to 210, you lose 120 points. And Buffett and Munger taught that to people as a powerful thing. It's much better to get a less spectacular company that you can hold all the way through at 10 or 15 times your money than it is a spectacular company that you might make 5 times in 5 years, but you got to be smart enough to sell it and go to another project.
Well, and you're something I want to ask you a little bit more too about what Charlie Munger was to Warren Buffett, what he brought out in Warren Buffett. Having said that, I want to bring Noah Buhire into this because, Noah, it's one of those things where you think, as we're hearing from Bill, these are both brilliant men, successful men, and would have been on their own, but something about them together brought out even so much more.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point here. It was the combination of talents that they brought to bear really was deeply important in the evolution of Berkshire. The other thing, just speaking as a journalist, the thing that I always found so incredibly amazing about Charlie Munger was his directness and his willingness to speak his mind, even if his opinion wasn't necessarily a popular one. As a business reporter and someone writing about investing, you always knew that Charlie was not just going to give you the pithy quote, but something that actually had some real substance behind it. And I think that's in large part what has resonated with a lot of investors over time. I mean, people would go. One of the things that's underappreciated about Charlie Munger is that deep into his 90s, people would go to Los Angeles to hear him speak at the annual meeting of a small publishing company called The Daily Journal.
The Daily Journal.
This was Buffett had nothing to do with this thing. They would just go to hear Munger alone. And I remember the first time I went to this thing, there were maybe 100 or 200 people. And, 3 or 4 years later, word had gotten out and a couple thousand were going. I mean, you have to understand, Charlie Munger was respected in his own right. It wasn't, he's often known for his affiliation with Buffett, but he really did have his own loyal following.
To back up Noah on that, one of our favorite things is when it comes to climate change, he just said, why don't we just build a seawall? Right? That was his opinion. It's like, okay, if it's real, let's do what they did in Amsterdam and just build a seawall in California and New York. And that's so simple and logical and less expensive, but that's Charlie Munger. It was always, common sense always won. The difference between the two men is Warren wants to die without any enemies. He has more of an urge to be liked. He's a wonderful man, and he wants to be liked, whereas Charlie could care less if he's liked. Right? He wants to share wisdom, share truth.
What was it like from the different meetings you went to and just kind of seeing them up on stage, things that kind of stood out for you?
Well, there's hardly any better comedy routine that's ever been done. Yeah. The back and forth. Of course, Munger had lots of the singers, but Buffett had plenty himself. And they played off fantastically. It was, I had a next door neighbor that was 4 years ahead of me in school. And I had no brothers, 3 sisters, and he was one of 4 brothers. And he and I are extremely close friends, but he's 4 years older than me, in the same way that Munger was 6 or 7 years older than 6 years older than Warren.
Right.
But yet we met and we were finishing each other's sentences, and that's the way these guys were. They were finishing each other's sentences. They'd say the first part of the sentence, and they didn't have to continue because the other guy already knew what the rest of the sentence was going to be.
It's just that kind of relationship.
I know, Buhire, I'm so glad you're with us because we've been reading from your obituary nonstop for the last hour here. And, to Bill's point about this idea of common sense and not always needing to be liked, you mentioned this, some of his donations, and this one's at the top of mind for me because it's relatively recent. 4,500 person dorm on UCSB's campus, which actually got a lot of people interested in dormitory architecture who didn't think that they would actually be interested in dormitory architecture. But here Munger is trying to solve this problem of student housing, and he got a lot of blowback to this idea, and ultimately they canceled it. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, look, in his later years, Munger used these donations that he gave to universities to play architect. I mean, he was deeply, deeply interested in architecture, and he had some pretty unconventional ideas that I think really bothered people, and it became its own, subplot in its own right. But you have to understand, for Munger, he was a incredibly widely read person. He wasn't as narrowly interested in investing and how to make money. Obviously, he spent a lot of time doing that, but he had an interest outside of it. The other thing I wanted to add, and this takes us in a slightly different direction, but for all that Munger would sit up on stage and sort of act as the scold and the curmudgeon next to Buffett, he did have a generous heart, and when you talk to people who spent time with Charlie, he was a deeply nice and caring person, and on some level, this sort of curmudgeon stance he would take on stage and in public sometimes was a bit of an act, but it helped him make his points.
So, Bill, how do you think about Berkshire Hathaway going forward? They've obviously thought about succession, and there's Ajit Jain and Greg Abel. But I do think about, Warren without Charlie, and what the impact that might be.
Yeah. So Charlie and Warren have set a team together to kind of come in. They've got two talented stock pickers in the wings. I'm guessing that this will be when they begin to emerge at the annual meeting. Greg Abel runs the operating businesses, and Todd Combs and Ted Weschler are running about $30 billion.
Two other important names.
That's who we think bought the home builders, for example, because it was smaller quantities than Buffett buys. And so that will cause their emergence. But Charlie's acerbic common sense and sensibility, there's just not going to be any replacing that talent. He was a genius in that. He would look at the situation and hit it only with the best logic, right? Each situation, regardless of who might be offended by the logic of it. Yeah. So he'd quote scripture, and then he'd support abortion rights, right? Mm-hmm. So, but logically, he was trying to solve a problem with money. Right. And the architecture thing just brings back to mind that he graduated from Harvard Law School and Caltech and was an architect, and he was the Renaissance man.
Kind of different sides of the brain.
Just an unbelievable mixture of mental model talent. Just amazing. His family called him a book with legs because he was always reading. Our podcast is called A Book with Legs because my son Cole is a gigantic Charlie Munger fan, and that's what we call the podcast. We interview authors of books, so we call it A Book with Legs.
And he's quoted in Noah's story. Noah, we'll obviously be talking this all week and then some. Another thought, as you were putting together Charlie's story, for Bloomberg, what jumps out for you here?
Well, I think, to your point of what's next for Berkshire, it's a fundamentally bigger, different place than, where he and Buffett started. So while, on many levels, Munger is not replaceable, there are a lot of things that he and Buffett pioneered together that there's a lot of that's been written. There's a lot that has been passed on based in the way that these guys did things. Yeah. And again, Berkshire is a huge company now with different needs. Right. And but a lot of the ways that Munger and Buffett think about the company are certainly going to live on.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Munger said in late 2021 that this was the largest financial euphoria episode in his career, which was 75 years. And then at the annual meeting this year, he said, I really don't think stocks are going to do very well the next 10 years. And then Buffett, I love this, Buffett chimes in, he goes, well, if I was running smaller amounts of money, I still think I could do really well. So which was heartening to us, because our $5 billion is smaller amounts of money.
So you're like, okay.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, we got a chance.
Priceless. And thank you for coming back. Bill Smead, we've talked to you over the years. We've heard you talk about Berkshire, Warren Buffett, and Charlie Munger. So great to get you to weigh in. Be well. Bill Smead of Smead Capital Investment. And of course, our Noah Buhire. Read his story on Charlie Munger. It's on the terminal and at Bloomberg.com. Noah, thank you so much of Bloomberg News. This is Bloomberg Radio.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Some big news in financial services. We talked about Apple and Goldman Sachs credit card partnership might be coming to an end. Apple recently sending a term sheet to the financial giant that would be a first step towards severing the contract. This is according to a person familiar with the matter. Apple, you know this, right? Among those, but this is one of the big players looking to disrupt financial services by offering its own high-yield savings account, product financing, a credit card, Apple Cash, and more. Yep, they know, fintech. Disruption. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, well, someone else who's looking to disrupt financial services is Chris Britt, founder and CEO of the privately held fintech Chime. Chime offers consumers checking accounts with no monthly fees. They've got savings accounts, products such as secured credit card that helps users build credit, and more. Chime says it has, quote, millions of members. And back in 2021, Carol, when Chime last raised money, it was valued at $25 billion.
Well, Chris joins us on Zoom from San Francisco. The company officially, too, launching the Chime Scholars Foundation, which we will get to in a moment. Chris, great to have you here with Tim and myself. Hope you're well. Tell us a little bit about the environment for your business, because it sounds like you guys have a very front row seat, if you will, to what's going on with the consumer right now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and thrilled to announce the foundation. But in terms of the consumer trends that we're seeing, yeah, we serve millions of consumers, and I think the relationship that we have with our members is that they use Chime as their primary bank account and primary way that they do their day-to-day spending. So we actually do, see a lot of, we do have a front row seat to transaction activity, balances. I'd say we're starting to see a little bit of a weakening among the consumer that we see. We've seen balances decline slightly, probably down about 5% year over year. But at the same time, we're still seeing spending that's been really solid. It's up, 6-7% year over year. And again, our members mostly use Chime for their everyday sort of non-discretionary purchases. So in many ways, we're insulated from, ups and downs of the economy, because people use our cards for their everyday, grocery transactions and daily habits that, really help fuel our business.
Chris, are you seeing their spending patterns change, like what they're actually spending money on this year versus what they were spending money on in 2020, 2021, and 2022? Has that mix changed?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're seeing more and more just a normalization of the economy and where spend is happening. So you're seeing things like rideshare at Uber and Lyft is up pretty significantly year over year. You're seeing more spending for, concerts and restaurants and those sorts of activities. And it's a well needed, sort of normalization of, just getting back to post COVID transaction activity. And that's been really healthy. At the same time, we still see unemployment rates that are really, really low. So, we serve consumers that make up to about $100,000 is generally the sweet spot that we serve. And those consumers can generally get jobs, and they sign up for Chime accounts, they get direct deposit, and they use us for everyday transactions. So, I wouldn't say our business is counter-cyclical, but it's very resilient to, be able to withstand, ups and downs of the economy.
Chris, because people use this for direct deposit for their salaries, for their paychecks, are you seeing people lose jobs? Are you seeing them jump around more, jump around less? What can your data tell us about job hopping and the strength of the economy for those Chime users?
Well, look, as you move down the income spectrum, there certainly is more turnover and more change in how and where people work and receive direct deposits. So we always see a little bit more turnover, than you might if the consumers that you served made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But like I said, it's still very healthy. People can, there's jobs out there for people. They're readily available, and a lot of people have, multiple sources of income. That trend hasn't. That's been pretty consistent, I would say. Where people might have a little bit of gig work for a side hustle, but still, the primary wages, come from a corporation or, office job that they have. People are, particularly in our portfolio of members that we serve, they're just amazing people that are resilient and can go out and hustle and get the work and get the job that they need to help their families and move their financial lives forward.
Hey, Chris, for those who might not be familiar though with Chime, just remind us how it all kind of works and what is the business of Chime and how you guys make money.
So Chime exists to unite everyday people to help unlock their financial progress. And we do that by starting with offering a core checking account, a deposit account that, Chime is not a bank. We partner with primarily 2 FDIC insured banks that hold the deposits. What we're really good at is creating, really easy to use, intuitive, low fee services and a end-to-end technology stack and sort of operate all aspects of the consumer interaction primarily through an app. So we don't, have the cost burden of a heavy, sort of branch infrastructure. We're able to operate at a very low cost structure. And then what we do is we deliver to these members that we serve fee-free checking accounts. So there's no fee associated with, having the core underlying deposit account. We give them access to their paycheck a few days early. We give them free overdraft services and other services to help them with liquidity. And we also help them with credit building. So that combination of services has really resonated with millions of people that rely on us. But
you make money by getting a fee on every transaction that they do off that account. Is that correct?
We have a few sources of income, but that is a very large part of our revenue is the interchange that is earned when consumers use their Chime cards for their everyday purchases. And what we like about that model is that it's very aligned with the consumer, right? We only monetize when they're engaged with us and using the card for everyday transactions. We've been very careful to design the business to not profit from their misfortune, which is oftentimes the way, larger institutions make money off of this segment. So yes, we earn money off interchange, and it's really allowed us to unlock free banking for millions of people who otherwise would be paying huge amounts of monthly fees, overdraft fees, you name it.
Let's talk about interchange fees. The Fed is proposing lower caps on those interchange fees. This is your business. How concerned are you about this? Does that mean that you'll make less money if the Fed does indeed go through with that proposal?
Of course, well aware of the conversations happening in Washington around interchange. None of the proposals being contemplated would have any direct impact on Chime or the banks that we partner with. So, we're monitoring it. It's sort of an age-old discussion and debate. But at the end of the day, interchange has been a huge positive for millions of people that suffer from, paying outrageous levels of overdraft fees and monthly fees. And, like I said, that this interchange-based business model has really been tremendously helpful for us to be able to disrupt this category. Look at the changes that have happened in overdrafts.
That's exactly where I wanted to go, Chris. Because you guys were early to do this. So many banks now though offer free online banking, no ATM fees, early direct deposits, no overdraft fees, something that you guys have been doing for years. How do you differentiate from those traditional banks that are now offering those services that you offer?
Well, I think it's great that all those changes have happened. It's awesome for our country. It's awesome for people, people in every state across the country. What do? We have to keep innovating and push the envelope on the next service that's actually consumer friendly and actually help our members, move their financial lives ahead for themselves and for their families. So we certainly have more copycat, companies startup types, but also it's in many ways it's flattering that these big institutions now do advertising on getting paid early and free overdraft. Although I'll note, like, I would say the overdrafts are fee structure are friendlier, but there's still some gotchas. They may give you a little bit of extra grace period, but a lot of these institutions still aren't shy about being pretty aggressive on the fee schedule.
Hey, Chris, just a few rapid business questions to wrap up the business part of our interview. In 3 and 60 seconds, I want to ask you, because we want to get to your foundation. We want to talk a little bit about your backstory. First of all, are you guys profitable?
We have very attractive, highly profitable unit economics. We are not yet profitable, but that's a decision we've made as a private company.
Okay. Will you be soon? Or that's not a goal? That's not part of it?
We're not optimizing for profitability right now. We may actually be profitable in Q1, but it's not.
Okay.
It's not a stated goal. We raised a large round of financing in 21, so we don't need to raise money again. But we're feeling like there's an opportunity right now to continue to pursue our vision, which is to be the number one market share company in terms of primary account relationships among consumers that make up to $100,000 a year. And we think that's within reach for us over the next few years.
Which tells you a lot about the folks that you are reaching out to and helping. Growth in users and how sticky. If somebody's on the platform, do they stay with you?
Oh, yeah. I think that's, if you were to, in a nutshell, describe what differentiates Chime relative to other consumer fintech companies, is just that. It's the engagement. It's the primary account relationship that we enjoy with millions of consumers. So the majority of people that bank through the Chime app are using us as their primary everyday transaction relationship and sort of way to manage their money. So it results in very high engagement, lots of transaction volume, and for the business, extremely high ARPU relationships with our members, but in a way that's very aligned with them.
All right. And growth in users, can you give us any kind of like year to year over growth?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're growing at a rate of, next year we'll grow well above 30%. Wow. So I think in an environment where a lot of companies are, MAUs are declining or flatlining a bit, we are a real bright spot in that we're, growing at a nice clip right now.
And just quickly, since you just did another funding round, any plans to go public anytime soon? I know this has been asked certainly in the past.
Well, we did a funding round in 2021. It's been a few years, but
now.
But look, we intend to be an independent, large public company. We've certainly, we've raised a lot of money, and so we want to make sure that we can do that for our amazing investors and also for all the Chimers that work here to support our members every day. So it's not something that we have planned on in the short term, but we're certainly about as IPO ready as a company could be, and we certainly have the scale to be able to be a nice public company. I think we're going to wait and see how the economy plays out and the stock market plays out over the course of the first half of next year and figure out plans from there.
Hey, Chris, want to talk about the big news this week coming from Chime, the company announcing the Chime Scholars Foundation. I actually, we've talked many times in the past. I didn't know your backstory. Give us just, a quick 30 seconds on your backstory and how that got you to launch a company like Chime, and then we'll get into the foundation.
Yeah, you asked about public offerings. Well, today is the public offering of Chime Scholars Foundation. I'm so thrilled to announce it. And I appreciate you asking about my backstory. I actually wrote a little blog post about it too on the Chime website. But man, I was so lucky growing up. I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, which is a sort of working class, town. Lived in an apartment building. And when my parents got divorced, my mom had to go to work and my dad wasn't around all the time. And by the grace of God, I had a neighbor downstairs. His name was Joe. And Joe used to look out for me. He made sure that I got to practice, did my homework, had some dinner, and we had so much fun. He became like a father figure, a grandfather, and really my best friend. And why that's relevant to today's news is that, my mom, when the schools got pretty tough in my town, my mom decided to try to apply to a private school, and I got in, but it was really difficult to pay for it. And Joe agreed to. I mean, I had a scholarship, but still it was tough. And Joe agreed to pay for it. Wow. And then later in life, when I got into college, neither of my parents had graduated from college. And I got into a great college, Tulane University. I got a scholarship there too, but again, it was tough to make it all work. And Joe agreed to pay for the remaining balance for me. And I just, that story, which probably sounds incredibly weird or lucky, it really was. And I think when I think about
very Capri-esque.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in ways that Chime could give back in some way, I talked about our mission around unlocking financial progress. Higher education is the most powerful engine to allow for economic mobility. So it's very much brand aligned for us is what can we do to help people gain more access to education? Obviously, there's lots of colleges and community colleges and different ways to get post-secondary education. But too often people are, saddled with tremendous amounts of debt, and they start out life like with a really difficult starting place because, they may be sort of feel forced to go to a 4-year college. They've got a ton of debt, and the first, part of their professional lives are very difficult. So that's what we've tried to solve for with this nonprofit that we've started, Chime Scholars Foundation. I think, we're thrilled to announce it today. We've already been in pilot for about a year. We've offered scholarships to over 300 students. And one of the things that's really unique is that it's not just for 4-year university. It's also for community colleges. It's for vocational training. And, we're really optimizing for people that have the grit and the grind and people that we feel a high degree of confidence are going to see it through and get their degrees and move their financial lives for themselves and their family forward. And I think maybe, right. In addition to announcing the 300 students, the other announcement that I just wanted to highlight is right. Chime and our board of directors and investors have committed to allocate 1% of the equity of our company into this foundation to ensure that we can fund it for many years to come.
Well, and I love it as you write, as we look at this release, it's like everyday kids like you who have responsibilities at home, work hard, hustle, yearn for something more. It's not necessarily everybody who had a 4.0 in terms of who you are providing this for or possibly offering up. Thank you so much. Chris Britt, happy holidays. Have a good holiday season. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Chime, right here on Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Every now and then, a story hits so hard it gives you the chills, and this is certainly one of them. It's about deepfake pornography, images that have been digitally manipulated to depict an individual doing something they did not, like in this case, posing naked, and about a group of young women in a New York City suburb horrified to learn that their photographs had been manipulated and posted online, and they ultimately took matters into their own hands.
It's the cover of the new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek. You can read the story now on the Bloomberg terminal and at bloomberg.com/businessweek. The story by Bloomberg News investigative reporter Olivia Carville and Bloomberg News cybersecurity reporter Margie Murphy, both of whom join us now. Olivia here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Margie joins us from our San Francisco bureau. Also here's the editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, Joel Weber, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Wow, Joel, how did this story get on your radar, get on their radar?
Olivia and Margie pitched it, and from the moment they brought the idea to us, we were mesmerized and then more honestly horrified. And we felt like it was a story that we had to do, and we needed to do it on the cover to make sure that the world found out about it, because it is a perhaps frightening sneak peek at the future and the lack of real common sense and laws about where generative AI might possibly take us. And the beginning of the story is like your worst nightmare. Olivia, why don't you take us there? Because that's ultimately where the story begins.
Tell us about Cecilia.
So the story starts in Levittown, Long Island, which is an interesting place to start. This is the birthplace of American suburbia, the first post-war US suburb. And this group of teenage girls who had all attended the same high school discovered that their photographs that they'd posted on social media had been manipulated into deep fake porn. That is, fake pornography created using deep learning models or artificial intelligence. And Cecilia Luque, who opens the story, discovered this while sitting in a car in a parking lot in a strip mall in Levittown. And as she's looking through this website that a friend had sent her, who had also discovered the photos, she sees images that horrified, disgusted, really scared her. These are photos which showed her being digitally undressed, very graphic images. Content on this sex site included people posting about her being raped and murdered. In some of the cases, the images, she was just a child, she was 5 years old. And she also saw photos of friends of hers who attended the same school. And it was that night, New Year's Eve of 2020, that news of this website and these deepfake images really spread across this suburb in Long Island.
Not them at all. In other words, those images obviously altered, right? They knew it. Like, they went through it and they're like,
but not obvious to anyone else.
Exactly.
And that's where the horrifying part comes in. Go ahead, Elvie.
Yeah, I was going to just say that for the woman now, because they're 22, 23, at the time they were 18 or 19 years old, and the scariest thing was looking at these photos where they'd been undressed and realizing that they look real enough that anybody else who sees them is going to believe it really actually is their bodies. So for Cecilia, it was looking at this nude image and knowing that the breasts weren't hers,
right,
but also realizing that most people who saw this image would think that they were.
So Margie, let's bring you into this, an incredible story. So not a problem. You call the police and you say, this isn't me, and it's done, and they take it down, right? It's that easy. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, not quite. At the moment, there's no federal law prohibiting deepfake pornography. So the challenge that these girls had were, they were so incredibly brave. They did this investigation mostly on their own, figuring out exactly who had created these images of them, and they took them to the police, and there was very little legal recourse for them to get justice. And in fact, it was only after searching through everything that Patrick Carey, the former classmate who'd been posting these images, looking through everything that he'd posted, they'd seen that he'd actually accidentally posted real child sexual abuse material, and that's what they got him on. It wasn't on the deepfake pornography at all. And that's an issue, that's a frustration being felt by women around the world, even though certain states in the US do have laws around deepfake pornography. It's just so patchwork across the US, and internationally there are issues with the law as well, because the technology has just advanced just at such a breakneck speed. Just lawmakers haven't been able to keep up with it.
What about the companies and the platforms on the AI front? Like, what did we learn about what they can and can't do or aren't willing to do, Margie?
Right. So the issue with a lot of the technology that's around now, and that from our reporting we saw was really popular for creating deepfake pornography, and even child deepfake pornography, a lot of those tools are open source. So there's this kind of divide in Silicon Valley. You've got the developers who've created this really incredible image generation technology that they want to be used for good, who believe that it should be kept out in the open for everyone to use, and not gate-kept by like big tech platforms who have typically provided services, and you might enter in a prompt and you get your image back, whereas with the open source technology, anyone can go and interact with the code, and therefore you can play with it. And even if a developer was to put a guardrail in place, like prohibiting adult content, it's relatively easy for someone to go in and change that. And so that's opened this Pandora's box. We've got all these open source technologies that that even when a developer realizes are being used for bad, the cat's out of the bag and people are already exploiting it.
Olivia, the story starts in Levittown. It's centered around Levittown, but it spans the globe. What happens in New Zealand? What's going on with a former police officer named Will Wallace?
I think that was one of the most remarkable parts of reporting this story, is that it really is a dual narrative. You have the girls in Levittown investigating the predator who is posting images of them online on this sex site that an ex-cop in New Zealand has discovered is already been posting images, deep-faked images of New Zealand women as well. And so he starts an investigation into the man behind this website. And it's very rare in journalism, or at least in my own career, where you have a story that has this dual narrative where you can weave them together and see an investigation unfolding in suburban New York, and at the same time in New Zealand, of all places, which happens to be where I'm from, there's an ex-cop trying to work out who is behind this website. I remember one night I was driving back from Levittown to New York, and I called Margie to talk to her about an interview I'd just done with Anna, who was in the story and ultimately discovered the identity of Patrick Carey, who'd been posting the images, and took that evidence to police. And I called Margie. I was excited because finally we had this key piece of the story to tell her about it. And that's when she responded saying that she'd discovered that there was also this whole other part to the story where there were these vigilantes, this movement trying to track down who was behind this website. And there was an ex-detective from New Zealand who had been leading this fight to kind of combat deep fake porn and to take down this deplorable internet sex site.
So where do we go from here? Because as you mentioned, there's no federal law prohibiting any of this, Margie. But what happened in New York State?
So in New York State, we have seen the district attorney in Nassau County, which is where this case unfolded, actually put forward or introduce new legislation trying to target deep fakes. The problem is that, what do you focus on? Is it the companies that are releasing this technology? Is it the regulators who can't catch up to this technology as it's being rolled out? Or is it the predators and bad actors like Patrick Carey who are abusing it? And
yes, and yes. No, but and I do also wonder, and Margie, let's bring you back in. I mean, in terms of police and law enforcement, how high up on the list is this in terms of prioritizing the things that they focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that was really interesting about Will Wallace, who you guys have just mentioned, he obviously is deeply involved in this website. It was a passion project of his to kind of find out, help the victims find the people that were posting these pictures, but also uncover who the admin of the website was. But because he has a background in the police, he has this, he really understands what it takes to be able to actually gather evidence, bring a good tip to law enforcement, and see that actually be followed through. And he would tell me how frustrated he was every time he would give a tip to law enforcement, different local law enforcements all around the world, and not hear anything back. But he also understood that it's so challenging when there are certain skill sets you need to be able to investigate this kind of crime. There needs to be better education so that when a victim comes forward and the first person they're speaking to, that they understand that yes, there hasn't been a physical crime, but that this cyber crime is just incredibly traumatic and super damaging, and that person is a true victim. And additionally, when the robust laws aren't in place for prosecutors to deal with people once they've found a suspect, that all is it's incredibly hard for police officers to do that work.
When Patrick Carey, when it finally did come down on him, Olivia, Tim and I were talking about this before we got going, before you guys came into the studio. So he ultimately was sentenced 6 months in prison, 10 years probation, lifetime status as a sex offender, can't own a smartphone anymore, or any device with a camera, or be within 1,000 feet of a school or a playground. 6 months, but he was out in 4 for good behavior. I don't see any good behavior here. That to me is not even a slap on the wrist. So it just kind of speaks to law enforcement not really necessarily respecting the severity, because you talk to these women and they definitely felt harm. and pain, and there was an impact.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, a lot of these women have sought out therapy since this. One lost 20 pounds from stress. One dropped out of college. 3 I talked to carry pepper spray in their handbags, and 2 carry knives with them now. They're so scared of what was done on the website, not only what Kerry was posting, but the hundreds, if not thousands, of strangers in the world who saw those photos and tried to reach out to them. One of the craziest parts about this case is that Kerry also included the girls' names, addresses, social media information, so they had these awful messages and phone calls coming through to them, people harassing them for months. And one of the threads on this site had over 30,000 views. That's 30,000 people looking at a fake porn image of you where they're writing about you being raped and murdered. You know, the fear was real when I was talking to these young women, and there is a deep-seated frustration in Levittown from their families, teachers at the school, the girls themselves, that Kerry only received 6 months. He was out within 4 months, and he's back in the neighborhood now.
It's amazing.
I think the greater thing here, and obviously the circumstances of this particular story are totally frightening, but it also does just speak to this greater challenge that we're going to be living through now. We have a technology that the world is not prepared for, and this shows you how unprepared we are for it. And sure, there's a lot of good that can come from it, but there's also your total nightmare. And, you know, props to Olivia and Margie for being able to tell this story.
Well, and coming off of OpenAI and the debate within that company about the ethics and the concerns about generative AI and where it takes
almost the perfect time for a story like
Joel,
this, right?
you did it once again.
He does. His
no,
timing.
they did it once again.
You guys did do it once again. Olivia Carville, investigative reporter at Bloomberg News. Margie Murphy, she's cybersecurity reporter at Bloomberg News. Incredible story, the cover story, most read, the Bloomberg Big Take, and our thanks to Jill Weber. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
It is time now for another edition of Bloomberg Plugged In. It's your weekly look at EVs. And all is not well when it comes to the world of EVs. Carol, we got the news that Ford is reducing capacity and hiring plans at a battery plant that it's building in Michigan because it sees weaker demand for EVs. Remember, sales of its signature F-150 Lightning plug-in pickup fell 46% in the third quarter.
All right, so let's see what Brendan Jones has to say about that. He is president and CEO at Blink Charging. It's a $241 million market cap company, trades on the NASDAQ. It designs, makes, owns, and operates EV charging stations. And the company says it's contracted, sold, or deployed nearly 85,000 charging ports around the world. He joins us on Zoom from Miami Beach, on the phone from Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, Brendan, great to have you here with us. Stock took a hit today, down about 7%. You're down about 67% year to date. Before we talk about the business, because you guys had a good quarter, what are you hearing from your investor relations teams about what's going on? Why is the share price seeing so much pressure to the downside?
So, yeah, I think the whole industry, if we look at the EV charging industry and then more broadly at the EV industry in general, we've been under a lot of pressure for the past year. There's a marked difference from the frothy years that we saw about 18 months plus ago to where we are now. And all the EV infrastructure companies seem to be suppressed at a much lower valuation. And if you listen to the advisors, you know, what everybody's saying is the same thing. It's great to be a growth company, but we're focusing on profitability now. So you got to continue to grow, and you've got to give us a definitive path towards profitability. And that's what we've done on Blink. We give them the timeline and a target, and we intend to get there by December of 2024.
Well, you're not going to grow if they don't grow the number of EVs that are out there significantly. And I think that's an important thing that I want to get from you, Brendan, is what's going on with EVs? I thought EVs were the future, and now on some dealership lots, they can't get rid of these things fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's some micro issues in the industry, but when we look at aggregate sales both globally in the United States, they're up year over year and continue to be up. 8% was the sales pen rate on a U.S. basis. In California, it was 22%. In one of the earlier months of the quarter, it was actually at 25 in California. California has the 2035 mandate of nothing but internal of EVs can be sold in the state, and several other states have adopted that same thing. So I think we're certainly seeing a little bit of a downplay in the sales volume, but over time, based on regulation and OEM commitment, we're going to see an uptick. And when you look at the broader numbers, we're looking at a 2030 number of just 35% EV penetration rate, and that would necessitate a need for 30 million chargers within the United States alone. So while there's some blips right now, we're still encouraged by the overall economic positiveness of the whole space, especially the states that are mandating EVs and zero sales of internal combustion engines.
Brendan, unfortunately, we only have about 45, 50 seconds left here. How do you compete, though, with the likes of Tesla that continues to open up its charging network and capabilities to other automakers?
Yeah, well, Tesla is primarily a DC fast charger owner and operated model. Blink is a full-on vertically integrated sales model where we sell chargers. The majority of the chargers we sell are L2 chargers, and we own and operate them as well. So Tesla is primarily highway-based charging. We provide charging in the metro. We provide charging in the home. We provide charging at multifamily dwellings. And we do it when we install and own or operate at far less the cost of the expensive DC fast charging. So it's a completely different business model, but we'll also be deploying chargers that can charge Teslas. And if we look more broadly at what our number one customer is who plugs in the Blink, it's Tesla drivers.
Listen, promise to come back soon when we have a little bit more time. We would love to continue this conversation. Brendan Jones is the president and CEO at Blink Charging, joining us on the phone from Miami Beach.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plenty ahead in our second hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week, including what it's like to fly private and whether economic conditions are impacting demand. Plus, the guide to holiday entertainment from our friends at Bloomberg Pursuits and from the founder of a company called Hire Santa. Apparently, it's kind of hard to find a professional to dress up like Santa Claus this time of year. Talk about supply-demand challenges. First up, though, this hour, a guest our audience knows very well. He's been joining our program for years, as Tim and I were discussing.
He was on with you and Mike McKee.
Mike McKee.
Okay, the show was called Taking Stock back in 2014. That was the year they actually launched Roan.
That was the first year.
That was the first.
So he's been here since the beginning.
Nate Checketts, of course, co-founder and CEO of Roan, joining us now. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I feel as close to being at home on air here than anywhere else.
Well, likewise, we feel like you're part of the family, and we're so glad to have you back. It's been, I feel like, a big year for you guys.
Really big year. I mean, big month in particular. A lot of exciting things happening.
Can we talk though about the billionaire Blackstone executive David Blitzer, former hedge fund manager Gabe Plotkin, ex-football stars Tim Tebow, Steve Young? They did a deal, and they're now involved in the company.
Yeah, it's so the quick story
about a year ago, right? July 2020.
So we just announced it, but this happened July of last year, and effectively what happened is we put a group together in an SPV with really exciting names, a bunch of current and retired athletes, as well as just incredible people like Blitzer and Gabe. And we bought out the private equity interest in our business so that we can really think about the business in a more long-term way.
What was it that the private equity firm wanted to do that you weren't ready to do?
It really wasn't. They weren't pushing us to do anything, but the nature of private equity is a 5 to 7 year hold time, and we were coming into year 5, and they're great partners. In fact, we're
talking about L Catterton.
The managing partner of their growth fund, is still on our board, even though they've sold their interest. That was part of something that I really wanted as part of the deal. And I just was kind of forecasting the future macroeconomically, time of uncertainty, if they wanted us to sell the business and it wasn't right for us. So, and more than anything, I kind of fell back in love with the brand and the company. And I thought, I kind of want to do this maybe for 30, 40 years, not 5 years.
Why had you fallen maybe out of love a little bit?
Well, the pandemic was a really stressful time, not just...
Understatement of the year.
Yeah, it was a stressful time for every business, every person, but certainly I think for me as a leader of a company, it felt like there was a new crisis every single week. And we had some growing up to do. The business still grew tremendously during that time. In fact, it was great for businesses like ours, but it really wrung me out. And I think I was at a point where, we talk a lot about mental health in our company. I was at a breaking point, and I felt like I either need to sell this company or something needs to change. And for me, the thing that needed to change is I needed to feel almost more invested in it, and I needed to make some changes.
I read a quote. I just want where you said, I think after this and kind of getting back control, nothing has changed and everything has changed.
Yeah.
Which kind of says so much.
Yeah, it's really exactly how I feel. Even though conceptually, L Catterton was a minority shareholder in the business. So in theory, their ownership change to a new group didn't change anything. But the way I feel has changed completely.
Do you feel more in control?
Absolutely. Yeah, and
do you have a controlling stake in the company?
Yes. So, we call it, because my brother is involved. I've got a brother-in-law, so we've got family control of the business, and the goal is to have a long-term hold here.
Dad's involved?
That was one of the most exciting parts about this. I called him. My parents have spent 3 years in London doing service and came back, and I said, "Hey, I have this crazy idea. What do you think about this?" And he's an incredibly experienced executive, and he said, "I love it. What can I do to help?" So we added him to the board, and it's been a dream. I've told people, look, there are people who are going to say, "Oh, you're working with your dad," and all I do is I forecast 20 years in the future, and I think if I didn't take this opportunity, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And I get a chance to work with him and have that family relationship. It's incredibly unique and special.
Yeah, no doubt about it, right? We only get to do this once.
Yeah.
Right? You got to figure out how you want to do it. Well-known investors, though, in the sports world.
Yep.
So how are you then maybe thinking about, we talk often about branding and partnerships, and especially with athletes. How are you guys thinking about that as part of the strategy, the growth strategy going forward?
Well, it's interesting. Our brand launched as an active brand. So we were carried in Equinox and Peloton and SoulCycle and Barry's Boot Camp and places like that. And then we added in our commuter line. I'm wearing a full commuter shirt and a commuter
We all love the commuter
blazer,
shirt.
It's been an incredible part of our business, but active is at our roots. That's how we still see ourselves as a performance brand. So the sports partnerships, the athlete partnerships, is something that we're planning to lean into more as part of this. We have 7 professional sports team owners on the cap table.
Right.
We have the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, English Premier League, all represented across the ownership group. And that's a great opportunity for us.
And a great revenue mover eventually? Could you see yourself doing lines around an athlete?
I certainly think there would be collections and collaborations in the future. Yeah.
What's the bricks and mortar strategy right now?
So we've opened 11 stores in the last 12 months. So we have 15 stores total now.
I thought retail was dead.
Yeah, it is certainly not for us. Our stores are all profitable. The payback period has been incredibly quick on these stores, and what they do for us in a market, we can measure the e-com impact and the awareness impact when we open a new store. So I think it's getting more competitive, though. Every brand is trying to open retail, so there was kind of a window of opportunity. I think that window's starting to close. Also, what's happening macroeconomically, that may shift over time. But online digital acquisition costs have been growing at such an increasing rate. Everybody's playing in that space that it became really expensive to acquire companies online. Now you can acquire companies or customers the old-fashioned way through retail and make money as you're acquiring them.
How do you track that?
The e-com lift?
Yeah, how do you exactly. How do you know that what's happening in the store, outside of a store, will lead to a sale online?
So we have a baseline of data in every single market that we track by zip code, right? And after you open a store, there's a 30-day measurement, a 3-month measurement, a 6-month measurement, and a year-long measurement. And you try and see, did the baseline of e-com rise since the store opening? Is it complete direct correlation? Hard to know because the brand's also growing. But if you then minus overall brand growth, did the market grow at an above rate of the standard growth rate, and that's kind of how we think about measuring it.
I am always curious about like a product line or a brand, because I think sometimes you can grow too fast in terms of the stuff you offer that it just gets overwhelming.
Yep.
So how do you think about how you kind of, cultivate that or curate that so that you don't kind of overwhelm the consumer?
It's tricky because the customer has given us such opportunity to do so many things as we've introduced Commuter, and we have to guard ourselves a little bit against it. But right now, we say we really can outfit about 80% of a guy's closet. We've been lucky. We've always paid above market for retail in particular. That was the toughest piece, as we've scaled but it's so critical to have good people in your stores. It makes all the difference. If a store is not performing well and you put the right person in, it will just completely transform how the store performs. So we've been fortunate that we've been able to attract really good talent.
Speaking of those stores, they're going to start selling women's stuff finally.
Yeah, we've been every interview at the end either
women's?
So when's it happening? So this coming May we will be launching women's.
Congratulations!
And it's incredibly exciting. It's been a long time in the works. We started as a men's brand. We did a women's capsule in 2019, and it went so well, it sold out. But you go into 2020, and do you want to take the inventory risk and continue to lean into it? But we brought in an incredible chief product officer who is really the most talented fabric person I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
And she has put together an incredible initial collection. It's been received so well as we've taken it to market and introduced it to wear testers. And part of the big story of Rhone is that we added 3 very talented female executives over the last 3 years, and they've been a big part of our success. And 70% of our team is female. So we wanted to build a collection that they were proud and excited to wear. And I basically just tried to get out of the way.
Intentional hiring women.
I would say we hired the absolute best people for the position, and they happen to be women. I think we have always believed in building a diverse and strong team. And we needed that at every level. We've just added a female board director named Tess Roaring, who's incredibly talented. But we always try and hire the best person for the job. And the best people for the job, for these jobs, were the women that we hired.
Talk to us about financials. You guys have said publicly.
Wait, are you going to do a commuter suit for women?
I can't reveal new collections on the air.
I've been waiting. How
I'm
many
trying
years?
To get some numbers.
I know. You're going to be Bloomberg,
Okay.
as we should be, but I'm just... Okay.
So $100 million annual run rate. Profitable last 3 years.
Yep.
What else can you tell us?
Well, the company's growing twice as fast since we did this transaction than we were growing before. And
better environment or what?
I would say it's actually probably a harder environment.
Yeah.
Most of the brands in our space are flat to down quite significantly this year. We've opened 11 stores, as I mentioned, in the last 12 months. There's been strong growth in a couple of our categories. We have some product lines that are growing at north of 300% this year. So we feel really good about where the business is today. And we have a lot of conviction that we can continue to grow and scale. It's not easy, but we're excited.
All right, we got a little bit of a lightning round.
I'm not going to jump in, but we do have a lightning round.
Lightning round.
Okay.
I don't think this has ever happened before. The first time.
We're evolving just like you.
Okay.
You don't have to answer in a lightning way because some of these are longer answers.
Okay. Go ahead.
Work-life balance. We talk a lot about work-life balance. You share so much of your life on Instagram. I followed you for years.
Thank you.
You have a family, kids. Is work-life balance an illusion?
Yes, it is. I mean, I don't even like the word balance. I think it's the wrong term, and I think I've grown as I've thought more about this. I can't even remember where I heard this. I love the word harmony, because in theory, when you're doing it right, your work should help you at home and your home should help you at work. And that the balance makes it feel like there should be a bucket of each, and you need to make them equal or at a certain proportion. And harmony shows you how they can really influence each other. And for me, becoming a better leader in the workplace, being more thoughtful and sensitive how I approach conversations, how we think about long-term planning has for sure made me a better parent, and I hope a better partner.
Trying to figure out where to go. Okay, this is back to kind of hardcore business. What prompts men to buy activewear these days? Has anything changed? What gets the Roan Target demo to pull out the plastic and buy?
Yeah, what's really exciting is I think the shift during COVID, where I think in particular we saw a shift for men to start taking better care of themselves, to allow themselves to take better care of themselves. That I think has continued, and I hope never goes back. It's really important. And so, there's a lot of different modalities. It could be yoga, it could be running, it could be cycling, but most of our customers do a balance of all of those.
You talked about the athletic side of the business. Is that still the big chunk of the business?
It's pretty equal at this
Is
point
it really?
between our active and our commuter lines. Yeah.
Wow.
There are a lot of customers who only know us for our commuter line.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's more profitable?
I would say our commuter line's more profitable. It's a higher price point.
Okay.
So when you told us earlier that COVID was really challenging, was that as challenging as the first couple of years of just getting the brand off the ground and like knocking on doors and getting Peloton and Equinox and Barry's to carry this stuff?
It was more challenging. For me, it was, there's no question, it was more challenging. In the beginning, you're so excited and you've got nothing to lose, right? So you're kind of trying to build this business from scratch. And if you lose it, no harm, no foul. It's not worth anything at that point. But then as it grows, there's more pressure, there's more people, and I care so deeply about how our team feels about work and so the pandemic was hard again on so many people and so many families. I just felt that weight all the time, and I didn't know how to relieve it. So for me, it was harder.
Last question, right?
Yeah.
If everything goes according to plan, Roan will fill in the blank.
Roan will have a massive impact on the mental health in this country.
Wow.
We do have 1 minute left.
Oh, huh?
Yeah. Mental health.
Okay.
Personally.
Yeah.
How did you get past that hump that you faced during the pandemic?
Well, I think a big part of it for me was building a toolkit and understanding how to deal with those challenges, because these things tend to catch us unaware. Anxiety, depression, you can't fully prepare for them, but you can build a toolkit to know how to address it when you feel that way. And there's a number of things that I do, but motion, exercise, I got really into contrast therapy, cold plunging, saunas, and social connection, intentionally seeking out. It's hard to build friends, as you age, but getting yourself uncomfortable makes a big difference.
Well, you've definitely made a big difference. You can tell in what you're doing in the last year, and you can tell how much you're enjoying it. So looking forward to the next 10 years?
Oh, at least. Yeah.
20 years, 30 years. Be well. Come back soon.
Thank you.
Always
Thanks
welcome.
so much.
Of course, Nate Checketts, co-founder and CEO of Roan.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Well, as pandemic worries have faded, the travel business has definitely come soaring back, with airline traffic more than doubling since its COVID era trough, and waiting times for deliveries of new commercial airplanes mostly stretching through the end of this decade because of robust demand. But there is one travel segment that seems a little bit stuck in a holding pattern, and that is corporate-owned jets.
So wrote Bloomberg's Thomas Black earlier this month. He reports on the aviation space and noted that even though the number of flights operated by the broader private aviation industry, so that includes charter, fractional, individually owned aircraft managed by third-party service companies, pretty much all the ways that you fly around, Carol.
Totally.
Yeah. It's almost 19% higher than it was back in 2019. That was the last full year, pre-pandemic year. Companies' in-house flight departments are flying about the same as they did, Carol, 4 years ago.
It's interesting. That's according to data from WingX. It's a Hamburg-based provider of market data and analysis on the private aviation industry. We've got a great voice on this. Back with us is Janine Iannarelli. She is founder and president of the private aircraft broker Par Avion, and she really sees daily what is going on minute by minute in the private aviation world. She's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Welcome back. How are you?
Oh, delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
It's great to have you here. Tell me what you said, though, when you walked into the studio and you were listening to our segment on the IPO market, which seems like it's having a tough time getting going, and how that kind of related to your industry.
Yeah, just take your last guest story and / IPO and insert the word jet.
What's going on?
That's a good question. What we have observed throughout the course of 2023, the buyers are sitting on their hands. And they've created excuses, and I would say the trade has as well for them, quarter over quarter. So here we are. We're at the end of the year. This should be the busiest time of the year in the aircraft trading marketplace, and it's relatively quiet.
Wait, I thought that we saw huge announcements from companies like NetJets buying many Cessna Citations, for example, earlier this year. That doesn't count?
In a way, no, because that's the fractional share and they need to meet demand. Actually, fractional flying is up year over year. I want to say the number is somewhere like 7.9%, whereas private flying is down 8.3% year over year.
Wait, how can those things both be true?
And Thomas Black in his story said flights from fractional operators, so we're talking about NetJets, FlexJet, have increased 41% from 2019 levels. That's
You're
the
still
data he came
flying
up with.
private when you use one of those operators. So make the distinction for our audience.
So the private sector and the corporate sector is whole ownership. These are individuals and corporations that go out and acquire the asset and the management, the crewing.
It's the company jet.
It's the company jet. Whereas
Tom
with the
Keene
fractional
flies all the time. No, go ahead.
You're buying a piece of an airplane. And so you have access to uplift pretty much on demand, but you don't own the whole aircraft and you don't control the operation of it.
This is exactly what our own Thomas Black wrote about earlier this month. And the question is that I have for you is that era kind of over when it comes to private ownership? We've seen pushback from shareholders about flying private. So now we're about actually these companies owning corporate jets because of the carbon footprint. So companies are now, not actually owning their jets outright and instead using those fractional services, which do offer the on-demand private flying. So the benefits of flying private without actually owning that asset.
So it's a conundrum. I don't think demand has diminished. It's just action has diminished. We really don't see people pushing away from private jets and looking for other means of transportation. It still is the most efficient form of moving goods and services, goods and people around the country, around the world.
But they don't want to own it.
Not necessarily so. I mean, I personally have not experienced people say, sell the jet, because of all the issues that you just cited. There are ways to reduce their carbon footprint, smart flying, direct flying in the United States is going to lead the way. Operators within the United States are going to lead the way to that goal of 2050.
But Janine, you broker deals, right?
Correct.
So how much is your deal flow down this year from, I don't know, what's is it the peak post-pandemic that you measure against? I'd be curious about that. And also where it was maybe 2019.
So good questions. My business is off significantly, but I attribute it to the aircraft that I'm actually offering. I mean, the market's sort of...
You don't like your inventory?
I love my inventory.
But it's not what people want?
It's not in favor with the market today. The most active segment of the business aircraft marketplace, I would have to say, is the small jet. That is the aircraft that initially led the decline and then started the rise back out of the global pandemic.
So what is this, like a 6-person?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I put it more in a dollar perspective, but 6 to 8 passengers, somewhere $2 to $7 million. And the aircraft range is going to be anywhere from about 1,000 nautical miles to 1,500.
So what don't people want then?
Is it now?
Yeah. What is it that they don't want?
It seems to be the category that I would call the super midsize and the ultra long range aircraft.
Why don't they want those?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. So first of all, if we talk about the ultra long range, that's the pinnacle of the marketplace. And the price point for those airplanes is anywhere from $50 million on
This
and
would
on
be
up.
like a Gulfstream G650 type
Correct.
thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim's a little
among
bit
them.
into planes.
I can tell. So that seems to have fallen out of favor. I mean, there are buyers out there, and there are plenty of inquiries. I mean, if I just look at the number of inquiries I've received year to date on every single aircraft I offer for sale, it just boggles my mind that not one person has stepped up to make an offer. Maybe more interesting is, let's say I get 200 inquiries over the course of 3 months on an aircraft. My guess is 10% are really going to buy an aircraft, but less than 10% of that 10% have actually done anything.
Forgive me, but do interest rates matter? I mean, when we're talking at this type of money, they don't matter for real estate, but they matter for So at least that's what high-end real estate.
I mean, do they
brokers tell
finance
us.
these deals? Like, yeah, that's a good question.
So another good question. My personal history is that I can count maybe on two hands how many people actually needed financing throughout my entire career.
It's a cash deal. Is it typically a cash deal?
Needed versus using financing are two different things. There are plenty of people who could pay, outright for a $40,000 or $60,000 vehicle, but if they get 0% financing, then they're going to take the financing.
Exactly that. Now, I have a number of prospective buyers that they may pay cash outright and then refinance later on. Most of them do that with a financial institution that they already have a business relationship with. The odd inquiry that I may receive for aircraft financing, frankly, is a little bit of a red flag for me, because they shouldn't be asking me. They already should have that in place.
Right. Right. They've got their bankers. They've got the bank that they've been working with for years on everything else.
They're qualified, the
and they
KYC,
just come in.
Everything.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about our audience. So how do you then use what you are seeing to maybe tell you what's going on in the global economy? Is it an indicator for you, or is it just maybe your business, your industry is going through some changes?
I would say flip that and say business jets are the indicator. And they always have been. Now, I think we're writing new history, and have been since 2019, because you could take the playbook and throw it out the window. Looking back over 23, I was musing over the fact that we're going to chalk this year up to a year of rebalancing. And I'm wondering if this was not the downturn that always follows a great upswing. And 24, because I'm going to use it to project a little bit, is going to be relatively quiet. But the driver for that is mostly the presidential election and the uncertainty that comes along with who will be our new administration and what policies will go into effect.
Well, President Trump was pretty friendly to private jets.
To a certain degree. I mean, some of those...
There were tax breaks that were given to people who used private jets during the coronavirus pandemic, for example.
Well, that's true. The bonus depreciation was a huge driver to motivate people to buy aircraft.
20 seconds. What are you worried about in terms of the presidential outcome and in terms of regulatory or oversight? And I've got to ask you to be very quickly.
I'm mostly concerned about tax implications. There's a lot of those expiring in 25. That's really the bigger concern.
Really fascinating, right?
I could talk about this all day.
I know. It's a world we love talking about. We didn't even get into eVTOLs, which I know is a big thing. Next time. Come back soon. Love to continue the conversation. Janine Iannarelli, founder and president of Paravion, a private aircraft broker. You can check out some of the stuff that she is involved in on her website here in studio. Have a good holiday.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
We turn now to our friends with Bloomberg Pursuits for their annual guide to holiday entertaining, and we have the recipe for sweet success no matter what kind of hosting duties you are facing this holiday season. Here with a breakdown are Bloomberg Pursuits deputy editor Jim Gaddy and a renowned food editor Kate Crater, who is joining us from London. And guys, let's cut to the chase. It's all about cheese, Jim, apparently. Who knew?
When Kate came to us with this idea, we have a holiday entertaining special every year. She said, guys, I just want to do something easy this year. And who knew? It was all about cheese.
Kate, it does feel like, I feel like even just going into Thanksgiving, just the holidays in general, everybody just wanted to relax, go into comfort food. And I feel like cheese is like the perfect thing. Give me cheese, wine, crackers. And I really am such a happy little soul.
Same, Carol. We are exactly the same. And I know I'll see you at the cheese board very, very soon. No, I think everybody has negative time around the holidays. And this year it seems more so than ever. And cheese really is an instant party. I mean, it doesn't ask for much besides that you unwrap it and serve it at room temperature. And sometimes we actually found this one cheese that's the It cheese that's Upland Rush Creek Reserve. The makers recommend that you warm it a little bit so it becomes like this crazy, rich, savory custard. When you see a picture of it, you won't believe it. It really is like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
Okay, so it's pretty. Does it taste good, Kate?
It's so good. It's so good. It's like this thick, creamy, a little bit grassy. It's made from cow's milk, and the cows have been munching on dry fall grass. So I think that gives it a bit of a toasty flavor, but it's you know how the best cheese when it's super creamy, oozy, is a little bit sweet and salty, and that's exactly what this is.
So what do you do? So Jim, like, come on in. I'm also from a family that even like the younger generations are really into charcuterie boards. Like that's what they all want as gifts, and that's what they do. But it's really, Jim, an easy way to entertain.
Absolutely. You know, it's crazy how it's so simple.
Yeah.
You don't really have to do that much. You know, you can get a charcuterie board, put 4 or 5 cheeses on it, pair it with some wine. Kate, I mean, how many times have you done this in your life, and how many times has it gone wrong?
Yeah, exactly. There's a very good success ratio when you have a cheese board, as you know, and Carol, you'll know from your daughter. So it's just it makes it's so easy, and it's just so great to think, because parties are stressful. They really are. And so if you can come up with some instantaneous ways to make people happy and guests happy that are no stress. And the thing is, it really works for everyone, because you can segue into a charcuterie board alongside, but there's also fantastic vegan cheeses now, so you can buy some of those to serve.
Well, there's a reason, right? Is it because, right? I love this part. It's produced from cows that have been snacking on a dry fall hay, right? So this is the reason why there's a sneaker drop, right?
Not a spring hay.
Yeah. Don't try and give them spring hay. It's fall hay, which I guess if you think about it, what little I know about farming means that it's sat there and soaked up the sunshine all summer long, and then it's super concentrated, delicious hay, and that you get in autumn.
The cows were also smiling as they did this. I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
The other thing that I found interesting about this particular cheese that our wine critic, Ayla McCoy, found out is that you can pair it with a red, like a deep red wine.
Yeah.
Which was kind of surprising to me. And you don't have to serve it at the beginning of the meal. You can serve it French style at the end of the meal. So it's really kind of like whatever time you want to serve it. You can serve it with a white wine. You can obviously champagne. We have a champagne, this Bollinger Special Cuvée, which goes with kind of any cheese. That's kind of like the classic. But I was really intrigued by the idea that you could get this aged kind of earthy red wine to serve with the cheese.
Fromage, yes please. And you also though do list some other cheese. I mean, the it girl, the it cheese is it, right? But you do, as you said, vegan cheese, because we have a lot of vegans in my family too, and we really have to think about that when we're entertaining. So there's a bunch of other ones, and I do like the wine, the one wine that goes with pretty much any cheese.
I know I wanted to quiz you on that, Carol, but Jim killed it. I was going to be like, okay, quick, Carol, what's the one wine to serve with any cheese?
Well, yeah, sorry. Jim, thanks very much.
I stepped on the joke.
All right, so let's get into some of the other parts of the section. I have to say, over the summer, Kate, I imbibed in some of these pre-mixed cocktails, and I really had fun with them.
There are some experts that are doing these canned cocktails now. One of them, who you might not have picked on your bingo card, is Jennifer Lopez, who you might know her music and her some of her movies. But she's teamed up with a superstar called Lynette Marrero, who is a star bartender in New York, and they are making a spritz that sort of is like a Paloma, so it's got that tang, but then it's got the fun and effervescence of the spritz. It's called the Delola Paloma Rosa Spritz, so it sort of rolls off your tongue, and it's great. It's like tequila plus bubbles, so who's not going to love that?
Sign me up. I don't get it. She's got Ben Affleck. She's beautiful. She sings. She dances. Now she gets her own little alcohol. Come on, J-Lo, share a little bit. Also talk to us about this, you guys. Jim, come on in on the open a box and presto. These ideas of kind of these kits that you can. I think it's kind of a great hostess gift.
Yeah, I love this idea, and again, it's going back to just make your life a little bit easier. Yeah. You don't have to make your own cocktails.
A lot easier. Wait, can we say a lot easier?
Yeah.
What did you say? You want it easy and simple.
And the one that kind of jumped out to me was the soup dumpling set. Yes. I had a brother-in-law and my sister who came to visit earlier this year, and they were like, you know what? I want the New York experience. I want to know where to get a bagel. I want to get some pizza, and I want to get the Chinatown soup dumpling.
Love that.
And so I sent them to the place Namois, where you get soup dumplings. I went down to visit last week. He was like, if you can bring some of those soup dumplings with me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to send them to you.
It's a great, right? It's a really sweet gift, Kate.
No, it really is, and they're pro. They really are. Like, those soup dumplings are the star of the dim sum table, and they've really become synonymous with being kind of an expert. They're sort of tricky to eat, because they're like so juicy. They're filled with broth, so you use a spoon, but chopsticks. So this is actually a good way to practice to get really good at your soup dumpling eating game. But there's also the woman who did this, Kat Odell, got all these together, and there's also a really terrific biscuit company that comes out of Nashville. Their biscuits called Biscuit Lovers Brekkie Biscuits. I keep picking the names; they're hard to say.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
I've heard about these biscuits actually from people who have been to Nashville, and they're so
great.
good. And they actually, do you know them, Jim?
Yeah. They're
Oh
great.
my God.
And they come with seasonal butters. So now, I think in the fall they had maple butter, and now they've just switched to brown sugar cinnamon, which sounds like a dream. Like it's cold here in London today, and I feel like that's what I want right now.
All right, so red wine, cheese, crackers. Oh, screw the crackers. Let's just get the biscuits. All right, I want to because we're running out of time, but the Southern Comfort. I love this story about what's happening at the airport in Atlanta. Like, who knew?
Well, have you ever? Oh my God, Carol! There are people who book through Atlanta now, and that is no small airport. In fact, it's the busiest airport in the world, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport, and people book to go to One Flew South, which has been around for a little bit. It started off; it had like a really good reputation for cocktails. But in the last little bit, the food, they have this really great chef, Todd Richards, and he creates, he just knows everything about stressed out travelers and stressed out people walking through the door, and he knows how to instantly make them feel comfortable. So, and part of it, I thought it was kind of great to talk to him because he says, do a buffet because it makes your life easier because you don't have to worry about doing plating, for people, and you also don't have to worry about late or early arrivals as long as you have things that can sit there and be reheated or just don't have to be at a certain temperature. But he also encourages you to serve a food like chili that people will have their own stories about, and then that's like a conversation starter right there.
I love it. Next trip, I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, I have to go through Atlanta because I've never done it.
You really do.
There's so much more too in the section. Panama City, I recently went to Panama. It's interesting stuff going there. We're running out of time, but I have to. And James Tarmy on the new movie on Leonard Bernstein. So it's really, really great read for the holiday and some great tips. Guys, I love you. Thank you so much. Happy
oh my God,
holidays.
Carol. Yeah, you made my holiday.
Likewise. Jim, thank you so much. Always a treat. Our thanks to Bloomberg Pursuit's Deputy Editor, Jim Gaddy, and Bloomberg News Food Editor, Kate Crato. We do love you guys. And happy holidays. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Coming up, we stick with the holiday entertaining theme and check on the soaring demand for people with white beards and red suits. We'll catch up with the founder of Hire Santa. He's actually also a head elf. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
I'm telling you why. Santa's coming to town. Santa's coming to town.
That's right, everybody. Santa Claus is coming to town at the most wonderful time of the year. The air is crisp. Bloomingdale's has its holiday window display up. People are decorating their Christmas trees and decking the halls. And a large team of Santas are coming to town, appearing at malls and retail outlets around the country. He's everywhere. And sometimes she's everywhere. I'll explain that in a moment.
That's true. Hey, this year, things are a little bit different than years past, though. Demand for Santas is actually far exceeding supply, at least according to our next guest, who knows quite a bit about goings-on at the old North Pole. Mitch Allen is the founder and head elf of Hire Santa. It's a Santa Claus talent and staffing agency. And what it does is it places Santas at events, parties, malls, and more all over the U.S. Mitch joins us on Zoom from Southlake, Texas. Mitch, good to have you with us this afternoon. So the Santa biz doing pretty well in 2023, no?
It sure is. We've had more demand for Santa Claus entertainers than we've ever had before, and all types of it, whether it be a home, office, retail establishment, malls. Everyone wants to associate themselves with Christmas through the use of Santa.
Totally get it. I'm also a fan of Elf on the Shelf. Just going to put it out there. Hey, Mitch, so are numbers up? Demand is up from what? Pre-pandemic levels? I don't know. Is it just you've been seeing organic growth? Has there been a recent peak? Give us an idea. Give us some perspective.
Sure. So here at HireSanta.com, we've seen the demand for Santas, people reaching out to us, is up over 36% over last year. And last year was record demand, even higher than pre-pandemic. And that's turned into more events. Our actual events that we've booked is up over 152% over last year, and many times that over pre-pandemic levels. So people are using it. And what's interesting is we don't necessarily have a Santa index, but that's what I'm calling it, that small and medium-sized businesses are really using Santa this year. I think that's going to be a blockbuster year for small and medium-sized businesses if the demand for Santa Claus at these establishments is any indication.
How much does it cost to rent a Santa?
Yeah, so it really depends, date, time, location, and how long you need Santa.
Okay, during the Christmas season. I'm not talking about a July. I'm not talking about a July Santa here.
Everybody's invited. We're talking about 4 hours. I need Santa.
Right. So if you need Santa to come to your home or office for just a couple of hours, you're talking about $200 to $400 per hour for a Santa Claus entertainer. Now, if you do it for a mall, the hourly rate is obviously much less.
All right, Mitch, is there a Santa school?
This is one of the surprising things that people don't realize. There is a vibrant Santa Claus community out there, whether it be online or in person, lots of organizations. There's Santa schools and conventions around the country, and that's where we go and recruit our Santa Clauses for HireSanta.com.
Hey, how seasonal is your business?
Well, the actual delivery of our service is extremely seasonal, about 6 or 7 weeks, but it's a full year business at Hire Santa. The first half of the year is really about sales. It's getting those large contracts, those malls, those retail establishments. We're working and then we're trying to get those contracts as well as we're trying to get more Santas. This last year, we added over 1,100 Santa Claus entertainers to our database alone. And so it is full season, but really it's go time. It's fourth quarter during the last part of November and, of course, all of December.
All right. So what's interesting is you shared with us some research that you guys have done, and some of the Santas talk about their best experiences of 2022, which are incredibly heartwarming. But I want to go to the worst experiences of 2022. What are some of the rough experiences? We have about 45, 50 seconds left. Just give us a couple.
Well, the rough experiences are really when Santa gets sick or injured. Every single year for us, we lose Santa Claus entertainers. You can imagine they're older gentlemen. They're susceptible to COVID and negative outcomes with that. Or we've had this year alone, we had Santa's already in a car accident. A wife got sick. Those are really heartbreaking themselves, as well as you really get the touching things whenever a child is wanting something, they're sick or their parents are sick and they're wishing something for them. But it's a wonderful time, and Santas really enjoy spreading that love and joy of Christmas.
I thought you were going to tell me about the Santa that flubbed the lyrics to Frosty the Snowman at a daycare.
That's what you were expecting.
That's what I was hoping for.
The kids at the daycare
a little levity.
Yeah. We get that a lot too. And when we've actually been on air and asked somebody, Santas, to name the reindeer. And they just froze. And so Santa has to know the names of the reindeer.
There are a lot of them.
Mitch Allen, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, founder and head elf of Hire Santa, joining us from Texas, where there's Santas.
This is the Bloomberg Business Week podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business App. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.